The guy says, I think to live the best life would be to live in a beautiful state all the time. And that has freaking stuck with me since I heard it. All right, my friends, welcome back to another episode of The Morning Takeaway. I have been going through some stuff this week. Not really going through stuff, but digesting some really crazy thoughts. And I kind of just want to go off the dome today. It might be a little rah-rah for some people. I know that the topic that I'm going to talk about is here and there, sometimes kind of, it's hard to buy into for some people. And I think that's why it's fun to talk about, because there is some back and forth with it, and I enjoy talking about it. So before we get going, if you take something away from the morning takeaway and you feel like, it might inspire somebody that you love or you're friends with, whoever it might be, if you feel like you're going to take something away or if you have taken something away, please share the episode. It helps me out more than you know, and you're already helping me out by watching this. I appreciate you. I love you, and I'm just super grateful that you tune in, even if it's 10 people. I have a very deep gratitude for the people that support me. So, anywho, let's get right into it. I want to talk about the quote right here. It's not even a quote. Live beautifully. And I'm going to talk about two stories that have basically happened to me this week. And it's not even stories, but two podcasts that I was listening to, and kind of the sequence of events that has led me to ultimately these past 4 or 5 days, I feel genuinely different in my own brain and how I see the world. So I want to start off I was listening to a podcast that was basically talking about how you can change your life by not having negative thoughts. And to start by challenging yourself for 7 days to go without one negative thought. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't have a negative thought. It means not taking it in and realizing, hey, this is a negative thought. On the contrary to that, it's being able to take the negative thought, flip it, and say, how do I make this work for me? It's not about having the negative thought, it's about recognizing the negative thought. And if you and we're going to get deeper into this about accepting, and that's really what I want to talk about this entire time, but it's about, if you recognize that you have that negative thought, you're still winning. Just because you have the negative thought doesn't mean that you have to start over for that 7 days, but taking count and knowing, hey, I just had this negative thought, but I'm not going to choose to keep rolling with it and let that domino effect in your brain just keep snowballing down and build up on that negative thought, right? So then we got into, in the same podcast, or in a different podcast, they were talking about, the different states that we get in. And essentially, if you want to change how you're feeling, then you need to change your state. And this is a big Tony Robbins thing. I love Tony Robbins and listening to his stuff, but he was interviewing somebody, and basically in the interview, they were saying, if you can get into these states of being where you feel your best, that's the ideal life, right? You're gonna live your life on a daily basis. You're going to structure your days and habits and everything that you do in order to make that state of being part of your normal life, right? And what he did is he asked this person, he said, if I can get to that happiness state all the time, right? And the guy was kind of like, I don't know if there's really a thing. There's a difference between happiness, joy, and fulfillment, and yada yada yada. And I have a strong take on that as well. I would love to talk about that one day. But the guy says, I think to live the best life would be to live in a beautiful state all the time. And that has freaking stuck with me since I heard it. So living in a beautiful state all the time. Now, when you just hear the word beautiful, and this is where this quote and what I've been living by comes into play when you say live beautifully. And when you hear the word beautiful, it gives you that connotation. And if structuring that connotation of your state of being around something that's positive and feels good, I think that sets you up for success in itself, right? So if I can channel my brain, and if you can channel your brain to this word of it's beautiful, right? When you hear that word, you think of bliss and the beautiful things in life, and whatever comes to your mind, it's generally a good, positive feeling. And that's what it's about. Training our brains to essentially get to that point and that state and that feeling and that thought of blissfulness, of beauty. And I think within that word, if you dive deeper into it, it's really about the simplicity of life, right? If you can be in a state of being that's simple and you're enjoying the presence of life and whatever is around you, go take a walk and notice the smells in the air and what the clouds are doing and what the trees are doing, and just feel how beautiful that is in itself, right? And like I said, this can be a little bit rah-rah for some people, but there is, once you get to that core being of Mother Nature, of yourself, of whatever it might be, you can feel that presence, and it's almost like everything kind of goes away. And I think we can all attest that we've been in those situations where you feel that. So diving deeper into this concept of, living beautifully and where you can channel positive thought into this, right? And I think this is where it gets a little rah-rah, and I think I have always been a really big fan of positivity and the power of positivity. Now, I realize there are crappy things that happen in life. There are crappy things that happen to people all the time, right? And I'm not degrading that in any sense, but in my opinion, there's always a mindset and a way out of that. And whether that is the way you see something as bad, and I've talked about it before, and shifting that perspective from have to get to, or, oh crap, this just happened to me, I'm going to let it snowball and let the snowball roll downhill and keep picking up steam and just control my life, right? Or you can choose, okay, this happened to me, good, let's roll with it. What can I do about it to make it happen? There's a quote that I really love, that life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it, right? So getting back into this thought of the power of positivity, I've always been in my brain kind of the same thing we were talking about, where if you have a negative thought, you can choose to, if you have that negative thought, you can choose to flip the perspective and say, and how do you get that to work for you? And that's where I've kind of always been, well, not always, but once I had a very influential person in my life, my aunt actually, and it's kind of always been wired in my brain that I'm going to try to make the best out of every situation. Well, I started reading this book. It's called Think and Grow Rich, and he absolutely blew my mind when he was talking about the power of thought. And not only the power of positive thinking and the power of negative thinking, but in just that, right? What is behind the power of positive thought and negative thought? And he dives into this whole idea of acceptance. And when you have a positive thought, you can choose to accept it and run with it. If you have a negative thought, you can also choose to accept it and run with it. And when our brain subconsciously chooses to accept that there's a negative thought, we're already admitting ourselves to defeat. We're going to let those things keep compiling, right? You've gotten in those moods where you're in kind of a state of flow and everything kind of feels right and everything, you're just in that zone, right? Well, that's kind of a culmination of the power of the positive thought, and you're accepting the positive thought, or you're accepting what is happening to you and stacking and stacking and stacking and keep going with it, right? So I've started to apply this principle in the past 5 days, and it's just been absolutely blowing my mind, and I feel so good and so clear mentally, and how I am able to communicate with myself and ultimately the actions that I'm taking on a daily basis, right? So if I'm in the gym and I pick up the 100-pound dumbbell to do a row, this has literally happened to me, and I'm like, oh, I don't know, I'm shooting for 12, I don't think I can get 12. I'm on that 8th rep, and I choose to accept the fact that I'm going to get 12 reps. My brain is going to say, all right, let's go. If I even the slightest bit have that negative thought, which has already crept in if I'm thinking, oh, can I get to 12? That's that negativity. That's that voice in your head saying, oh, can I get there? And if you choose, I literally in that moment say, I'm not going to accept that thought. And think about that in that way. I won't accept this thought. Well, now you're ridding of the opportunity to even stop at 10, right? And I get it. There's physical things that get in the way. If you're training to failure and you say you want to get to 12, well, that's not really training to failure, number one. But number two, you're going to give out. Like there's a difference between those two ideologies, right? So let's take another example for, I keep relating it to fitness in my own brain, but let's say you are, I don't know, you're on a road trip, and you know what? I can't even think of an example right now, but he uses it talking about money, right? And if you choose to, I can't accept or think of an idea, and then I'm looking at the book right here, and that's all it talks about, right? How to think these things and these riches and money into your physical being. And again, it can get rah-rah for some people, but it's, in my opinion, it is what you choose to accept. And in this book, he talks about, get that number in your head that you want to make. And if you even have the slightest doubt that you're not going to be able to make that money, or whatever you are thinking in your head, whatever goal it is, you don't think you're going to be able to get there, well, you've already admitted yourself to defeat, right? It's the same thing. I'm not going to get to those 12 reps. Well, if you, in your brain, start talking it out loud, your subconscious mind hears the vocal cords, and you talk it out loud, and you start manifesting these things, and you start choosing to rid of those negative thoughts in a different way. Well, what also does that do? It's manifesting good energy, right? So I'm a big believer too. The energy you put out is the energy you're going to get back. And the more that you can portray that in your own life and in these practical instances that we're talking about, well, you can begin to build that snowball and let it roll downhill in the most positive way possible, right? So, I'm just kind of going on a rant here, and I think that art of accepting thought, whether it's positive or negative, is truly like one of the most most basis foundational level of like what we do and how we act. And he dives into more on like faith and belief. And if you want to talk about faith, whether you're a religious person or not, in my opinion, I don't see the faith as a religious topic. I am going to read you what I wrote in my journal the other day. And I felt like it was the craziest Aristotle type thing I've ever written in my life. But let's see, where is it? All right, here we go. So here was my takeaway. Faith is what allows the acceptance of a thought to become a reality, to become a belief in reality. I'm going to read that one more time. Faith is what allows the acceptance of a thought to become a belief in reality. So that's really deep, and maybe we can have a discussion on that another time. But if you really think about it, and believing and knowing that you're believing and accepting and believing this stuff, I ultimately believe that you can change your life. And I truly, truly, truly believe that. And it's all about manifesting that good energy and, wishing the best for people, being kind, all the things that I like to talk about on this podcast. And, I don't want to get redundant, and I don't want to keep these podcasts too crazy long. But, in a nutshell, thinking positively. See if you can go on those 7 days of recognizing negative thought, number one, and choosing not to accept those thoughts. And then number two, have something to come back to. It's kind of meditative. So I keep coming back to live beautifully and seeing the beauty in every little thing. And I think, if you can find something that works for you, it's a really powerful thing. So, with that said, let's get into the last bit of the podcast where we generate a random question, see what it's going to give us today. Generate random question. What is your biggest regret from the last month? Wow, these always seem to go into play. Well, before I have discovered everything, I was kind of going through a funk the last 2 weeks before this past week. And I think my biggest regret is just and I'll be honest, I drank a lot on one weekend, and it just completely screws with my head. And I have nothing against drinking. I mean, obviously do it in moderation, be healthy, and depending on your lifestyle, whatever. But for me, it sets me back so incredibly. It's almost impressive how much it sets me back, because I just feel like crap. I don't feel mentally clear. The fogginess is in my brain. It's just not good. And it sets me up for that negative thought and feeling like I don't have a momentum and creating my own momentum. And with what I do, like it's very self-motivated, and the discipline has to be there. And when you drink too much and you freaking sleep, and for me, sleeping in is like 8 a.m., right? I still feel like crap. There's a little bit of a sense of guilt, and that's also something I'm working on. But without getting too much into my life, like this is something, in my opinion, that like if you are going through something, there's always light at the end of the tunnel, no matter what be. And if for me, actually, a long time ago, it was somebody talking on a podcast just like this that really opened my eyes. So I think that's a good way to wrap it up. If there is something you take away, if there is something I said, please share it. I hope you take it with what you will, and have a good day, live beautifully, and don't forget to smile.